All right, this is our last lesson on how to avoid plagiarism, and this particular lesson is going to cover how to correctly cite your sources, both in what's called a works cited page as well as within the text of your essays. Those are two places where we have to cite our sources when we use them in academic writing. So let's get started. Okay, so up to now, when we did our exercises over summary, paraphrasing, and direct quotes, when you give an author credit for his or her work, you have just simply mentioned them in the context of your paragraph. And that's a good start, but there's a more formal way to do this. The Modern Language Association, which is also called MLA, is an organization that has created a specific style for giving credit to authors. That's where we get MLA style from. And in English classes, this is the style that we use. So we're going to use MLA to give credit to your sources in two ways. First, we're going to look at the works cited list, which is like a bibliography at the end of the thing you're writing. And then we will follow up with what's called in-text citation. So let's start with this works cited list. Let's imagine that we're creating a works cited entry for the Venus flytrap article. So at the bottom of the article, it gives some information about where the source comes from. It says this chapter appears on page 8 of the fake book, The Great Outdoors, written by Samantha Buglover, published in 2013 by Best Press. Okay, so the first thing we need in MLA is the author's name. And we always start with last name, comma, and then first name followed by a period. So if you look at the example here, we have the last name first, Buglover, comma, Samantha, period. This chapter appears on page 8 of this fake book, The Great Outdoors, and it is by Samantha Buglover, published in 2013. So there you go. There's the first part of our citation found right here. Okay, now we need to put in the title of the book. When we are putting in major works, or what we call containers, which I'll get to in a minute, we put those in italics and then another period. So because this is a book title, we're going to italicize it and put a period after. Okay, next comes the publisher name. So that's right here. It's called Best Press, and we follow that with a comma. And then lastly, we're going to put the year of publication followed by a period. The period is considered the end of the citation. Unless you are doing research that comes from a short section of the book. And in that case, when you have a book and not an online source, you're going to go ahead and add the page that your citation came from after the year. If you do have a page number, you need to change that period to a comma and then put your page number with the period at the end. If you have more than one page where you got your information, then you're going to use not PGS period, but a double P, lowercase with a period, for pages. That indicates that we have more than one set of pages here. Okay, so far our works cited list has this one item for the summary and paraphrasing work that we did. It looks just like this when it's done. But what if the source is an article that was found online? That was the case for the sumo wrestling article that we read. Okay, so we already know the name of the author. The author is Jason Mori. So remember, last name, comma, first name, and then a period is how we start our citation. But before we move on, we need to talk about this thing that I alluded to before called containers. So a container in MLA style is just a larger collection of material. It can be a book, a website, a magazine, anything that contains smaller sources of material like chapters, articles, short stories, or poems. So say that I'm just using a chapter as a source in my essay, The book that it came from is a container and the chapter is my source. Same thing with online sources. When I use an online article, the article is the source, but it comes out of the larger website, which is my container. And then anthologies work the same way. So anthologies have collections of stories, poems, essays, all kinds of things. Say that I'm just looking at one particular poem from this collection. The poem is the source, and the anthology is the container. So in MLA style, those major works or containers are written in italics. This particular source came from this fake book, The Great Outdoors. So because it's a book and not just a chapter from the book, we italicize it. But if your source is something small inside a container, you're going to list the smaller source first and put that in quotation marks. Here's an example. The title of this article is The Daily Life of a Sumo Wrestler. So we're going to put that in quotation marks because it comes from a larger container from an online source. And that source is the magazine, the online magazine, The Interesting Times. So we need to italicize that and then put a comma after it. Following this, you add the date of publication, and it has to be in this format: the day, the month, and the year, followed by another comma. Now, all months with names longer than 4 letters do get abbreviated. Okay, and then the last thing that we put in for an online source is the full URL of the article, but we're going to leave off the HTTPS part. And we'll finish it with a period because we don't have page numbers in online sources typically. So sometimes you're going to find for an online source that the article doesn't have a date, or it may be the kind of thing that's likely to change frequently on the internet. And when that's the case, you want to go ahead and put the day that you access the article. That means the day that you actually looked at it online. So I could put a date that I accessed it, and then that would be helpful to know if this website might be updated or changed, or if I didn't have this publication date here. But in this case, since we have a publication date and it's from an archived online magazine, we're going to go ahead and leave it off. Okay, so if we were writing these summaries, we would go ahead and add to our works cited list, and it would look just like this. You would have the entries in alphabetical order, so we would start with the last name that comes first in the alphabet, and then the next one. And then you should notice one more thing about these citation entries. If your entry goes over to a second line, you need to indent that line. That's called a hanging indent. And you have in this weekly folder an MLA study guide that's going to help you remember all of these pieces. It's going to show you how to cite books, online articles, even online videos. Okay, we are going to actually use the second page of this style guide to practice making a brand new entry in our works cited list. So on the next slide, you're going to see some information about a sample online article. What I'm going to ask you to do is use your MLA style guide. This is the one we just looked at that's in your weekly folder, and it's just called MLA style guide. And you're going to use it to create a works cited entry for the article. If you are working with a group, which you are allowed to do, or a partner, you can check your entry with your group members to see that everyone got the same results. So let's take a look at this article that we're going to try to cite. We have a title here, Why the Squid Has One Giant and One Tiny Eye. And we have an author right here. It's Swapna Krishna, and that's listed out to the side here. Our online magazine, this is the container, remember, is Smithsonian Magazine. We do have a publication date right here. It's February 13th, 2017. And sometimes, guys, if you don't see a publication date up at the top, you may have to scroll down to the bottom to see the author and publication date. And sometimes those may not be listed online. Sometimes you may not have an author that's listed or a publication date. And if that happens, I will help you with that as we are writing these next sets of essays and show you what to do. And then this is our URL. It starts with HTTP and it goes all the way through Smithsonian Mag to the word squid. It has been shortened for this exercise. The real one is a lot longer, but we're just going to use this simpler one for practice today. Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and see if you can create a citation for this article. So go ahead and do that and then pause the video and we'll see if you got it correct. Okay, if you're back, hopefully you're ready to check your answer. It should look something like this. We have Krishna, comma, Swapna. There's our last name, comma, first name, period. Then we have our article title, our source, in quotation marks with the period at the end. Our container is italicized with the date. And then we have our online URL. Okay, so hopefully you got something close to that. Now that you know how to build a works cited list, we're going to talk about how to create in-text citations. So an in-text citation is where you give credit to the source within the actual text of your own writing, within the actual essay. So you already learned how to do this informally. If you remember back to Eva in our exercises with summary and paraphrasing, she did this at the beginning of a sentence. According to writer Jason Morey, comma, a typical training can last up to 4 hours and involves stretching drills, weightlifting, and practice matches. Okay, so MLA really just requires you to mention the name of the author and the page number where you get your information. But online articles don't have pages typically, so you don't need to include these in an in-text citation. So your sentence could just look just like this. You've already mentioned the author here, so technically you have cited this source. Or there's a different way that you could do it. You could move the author's name to a parenthetical citation at the end. So here is the same sentence, we just didn't lead into it with our own words. And I have the author's last name in parentheses at the end of the paragraph. And notice that we have a period at not the end of the sentence, but the end of the citation. The end of the citation is considered the end of the sentence. Okay, for books, you're going to do it the same way, but you also want to include the page number where the information is located. So if you remember back to the Venus flytrap article, we have this summary from it. Venus flytraps need extra nitrogen, comma, so they get it from insects. Now, I didn't mention Samantha Bug Lover leading into this summary, so I need to put her name in parentheses at the end. I only put her last name, and then I have the page number. And notice that there is nothing but a space between the author's name and the page number. That's all we need. You can also put the author's name in the sentence, just like we learned to do, and start off with a transition like this, according to Samantha Bug Lover, and then just put the page number at the end. That works too. Okay, so our last little practice section. In this next slide, you're going to see a passage from a book with an author and a page number. I'm going to ask you to paraphrase or directly quote something from that passage, and you're going to use an in-text citation. That means within your writing, not on a separate works cited page, to give the author credit. Okay, So here's our not magazine, I'm sorry. In this case, it's a book, and it's titled Mummy. The author is James Putnam, and this excerpt comes from page 14. From the earliest sand burials 5,000 years ago, the Egyptians could see that a body had to be dried to stop it from rotting away. They developed a method of drying with natron, a natural salt that left a corpse more flexible and lifelike than drying with hot sand. Okay, so what you need to do is either paraphrase or use a direct quote to summarize the idea here, and you need to give an in-text citation in some way. Go ahead and pause the video, try it out on your own, just like the last examples we looked at, and when you're done, unpause the video, and I'll give you an example of what it could have looked like. Okay, so if you are back and you have unpaused the video, here's a sample answer. In his book, Mummy, it's italicized because it's a larger work or a container, James Putnam explains that Egyptians began using a natural salt on the bodies because it helped them dry up without rotting. So I have my author here, and for that reason, I don't need to put it in parentheses because I've already led in to what I'm using from the source with the author's name. So all I need is the page number and a period at the end of the parentheses. Okay, it also could have looked like this. Say that I didn't lead in with the author's name in my own writing, and I just have this summary. To prevent the bodies from rotting, Egyptians began using a natural salt called natron to dry them. I'm sorry, that's more of a paraphrase. I didn't lead in with the author's last name, so I need to put it here in parentheses with a space in the page number and a period at the end. Okay, so just as a reminder, the first page of your MLA style guide is going to help you remember all these details. I want to assure you that no professor anywhere probably has every single MLA or APA rule memorized. They just know where to go to find the information. They know how to look it up online. And there is a link to what's called OWL at Purdue at the top of this guide, which has a full lab where you can look at a full MLA style guide with every kind of source imaginable that you might have to cite. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. We're going to read this sample essay to see how all the pieces fit together. So it's called Making a Mummy by Steve Student, and this particular summary takes two sources to show how a mummy was made. As we read through this, and you have this article in your weekly folder, I want you to notice how the student uses in-text citations with lead-ins to the author name and page numbers where needed, and how they either summarize, paraphrase, or directly quote from their sources. The ancient Egyptians believed that when a person died, their soul stayed with the body. For this reason, they felt it was important to preserve the body so the person's soul could live forever. Many of these preserved bodies we call mummies managed to stay intact for thousands of years. What did the Egyptians do to make this happen? Okay, so we've got an introductory paragraph there introducing the topic and then asking the question that we're now going to answer through our sources and summary. First, they had to remove all of the vital organs from inside the body because they knew these would start to decay first. In his book, Mummy, James Putnam explains that to remove the brain, the Egyptians pulled it through the nose with long hooks. Sometimes the body's organs were placed in jars that would then be buried near the body. Okay, notice that I've got the author's name here leading in. So I just have the page numbers where I got my information at the end of each sentence. And then we're going to transition to the next thing. The next step was to give the body a series of treatments. To dry it, they covered it with a salt called natron that, quote, left a corpse more flexible and lifelike than drying it with hot sand. Now, I didn't use the author's last name here, so I have to put it in parentheses with the page number at the end. They poured tree resin on the body to preserve it further, then rubbed it with oils and waxes to keep the skin from cracking. Finally, they wrapped the body with linens, that had been treated with oils, resins, wines, and wax. All of these substances would either keep the body dry or fight bacteria. Now again, I didn't use the author's name leading into that information, so I had to show where I got that information in my article write-up, and I've got the author's name in parentheses at the end of what I used from a source. Once the body was wrapped, it was ready to be buried. From beginning to end, the whole process of preparing a mummy took 70 days. Even though they lived long before many of our modern inventions and chemicals came along, the ancient Egyptians seemed to know how to make the most of what they had. Okay, so I've got my works cited at the end in alphabetical order. I have a hanging indent. And if I were to be reading along and want to know where this information came from, I could simply look down at the works cited and realize that this comes from a book on mummies when I see James Putnam's name, or I could look at this Maywell, and this connects to the first part of the citation here, which tells me this came from a National Geographic. And that's why the citations are so important, because readers want to know where, if they're being careful readers, where the information comes from. Is it good, solid information? And does this person cite their sources in a way that establishes credibility? Okay, so it's your turn now to put all of this together. You're going to write a short essay using in-text citations and a works cited list. And you have a prompt that is in your weekly folder. It looks just like this. You have a topic about puppies. We're going to keep it light and happy. I have a puppy right now, and this puppy does chew just about everything that gets in his mouth. And your question that you're going to find out is, why do they do it? So you're going to write a very short, very, very short 5-paragraph essay explaining why puppies chew. And in your essay, you need to start with a brief introductory paragraph. You're going to include 3 reasons that puppies chew. Each reason should have its own paragraph. You're going to include information from at least 2 sources. You need to use in-text citations to give credit to your sources, and you need to use a mix of anti-plagiarism techniques. So both paraphrasing and direct quotes, at least one of each type. You need to finish with the closing paragraph and include a works cited list at the end. So basically, guys, it should look just like this sample essay by Steve Student that we just read. His topic was how are mummies made. Your topic is why do puppies chew. You have some provided sources here. You could click on these links and use them to find information, or if you want to, you can go find a source of your own. As long as you cite it both in the text and on your works cited, that's all that matters. You just need to show me that you can cite your sources in those 2 places. You should use your style guide and keep in mind the sample essay, which will show you how this should look. And we will check this out when you are back in class. We'll have your classmates give it a look and make sure that your works cited is accurate and that your in-text citations are accurate when you're done. This is a percentage of your final grade, so be sure that you give this your very best work. All right, guys, go ahead and start investigating why puppies chew. When you're ready, you can start summarizing, And remember that anytime you use something from a source, you need to cite it both in the text and on your works cited page.